Welcome everyone to today's webinar. We are so excited to have you here today. I would like to introduce myself. My name is Timothy Cross. I am the director at Share Faith for Share Faith Media, one of the ministry brands director here. And we have David Choate with us. David Choate.
Hey, my name is David Choate. I am the director of Share Faith Kids, and super excited to see you all here, and very excited to hang out with my good friend, one of my favorite people, Tim Cross. So I think this is going to be fun.
Stop it.
No, it's true, man.
Stop it. Get out of here.
All right, fine. You paid me to say it, though.
I did. I'll pay you later. All right. Today, we're going to focus on Easter, how to get your Easter services online. But I do want to mention, so starting today, we are going to do daily webinars, with each day being a different topic, with each day being a different kind of need in the church that needs to be talked about. So today's Easter, but tomorrow we're really excited. We're going to have a pastor from Life Church. If you guys don't know who Life Church is, they have been doing online church for a very, very long time. They're located in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It's a great church. So we're excited to have that conversation with Pastor Brandon. And then Thursday, we have Pastor Dave with us, and his church is Claymore Assembly. And it's a kind of a different spectrum, I guess. So if you have Life Church, which is a larger church, Pastor Dave's church is a more rural church. So our goal is with each day, we are answering questions to help kind of facilitate the needs that all of you might be facing. We know that not every church is the same. So we're kind of setting each day up to kind of set up, to answer questions that you might be facing. So with that being said, David?
Yeah, sure. So as we get into this, a lot of the information we'll be sharing, we've just found from being on different Facebook groups, different podcasts. If anyone says right now they have the blueprint for churches going forward, they don't, right? We're all figuring this out together. And so a lot of what we'll be talking about are questions that you have submitted. And today we're focusing on some Easter specific questions, but if you have more or maybe on a different topic, please share those with us in the Q&A section. As we go, we're going to be talking about different products and services that Ministry Brands has to offer. And if you have a specific question about one of those, please just reach out to us at careteam@ministrybrands.com, and we'll make sure and get back to you on that.
Yeah, so for today's focus, we know Easter's right around the corner. So we knew that if the start of our webinar series needed 100% to focus on Easter. And with that, we noticed a trend just through all the different brands, some questions that kind of rose to the top. So that's what today's going to focus on. So those questions were, what do we do with our Easter volunteers? How do we invite people to our online Easter service? How do we create an engaging teaching/worship experience? And then how do we do Easter kids ministry? So we're excited to kind of talk about that today. So just so you know, the kind of format we're planning to do with each webinar, there'll be an hour long with 45 minutes, give or take, of discussion. And then at the end, we plan to just do some quick Q&A from all of you. And then if we don't get to it, obviously, we have the Q&A. And then again, obviously, you can always email the email address. So with that being said,
yes, David. And that email address again, careteam@ministrybrands.com.
Flipping back, there you go.
Yeah, right, there you go.
I didn't want to say it because I was like, okay, what? I'm care team. I was about to say care. Anyways.
There's a lot of things we'll be talking about, different technologies and tools. But before we get started, a few words of encouragement. I know all of us here are so proud of you, the church. This has been a huge reset button for us, and we've all been left kind of figuring it out. And so just well done. And a few words of encouragement. As we go into Easter, one of the things that I've been reminded of, and I like to remind others of, is Easter is not canceled. And it's just so important as we go into this season to remember what we celebrate is the resurrection of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, his victory over sin and death, and literally that with God, all things are possible. And so that is good news, especially as we face the unknowns of new ways of doing service and new routines and rhythms. Second, want to remind you that you are not alone. One of the things that's very exciting for me about being a part of this webinar is just not myself and Tim, but we have an entire family here at Ministry Brands of technology leaders, of ministry leaders, and they are here to help you succeed. So our goal is to make sure that whatever you need to be successful for Easter coming up and beyond that you have. So remember, you're not alone. And then finally, I think it's important to keep in mind that every church is unique. And as we talk about different strategies and solutions, they are not one size fits all. So take notes, write down things that kind of connect with you and that inspire you, and then take those to your team and discuss how they might fit in your church and in your context. And if you don't understand, like maybe you love an idea, but you go, I don't know how this is going to work for our church, that is a great question. Let us know a little bit about who you are and some of your questions. Drop that in the Q&A section, and yeah, we'll reach back out to you.
As you're talking, Dan, I'm just seeing some of the chat come up, man. We have people from all over the country just jumping in.
Awesome.
I love to see that. So good. So let's jump into our first kind of big, because we have a lot to cover and we want to make sure that we're hitting our timer, because that's important. So the first question was, what do we do with our Easter volunteers?
Yeah. So big ideas here as we go through this. When we look at our Easter volunteers, communication is number one. Hosting an Easter volunteer meeting, looking at live stream moderators, understanding what they do and how they operate, and then finally the importance of technology training. So I'll hit this first point here. Communication is number one. I've got a local friend and pastor. His name is Ron Swanson. And if you're a Parks and Recs fan, this guy was Ron Swanson
it's not
before.
That Ron Swanson,
no,
everybody. It's not.
It
would be cool
original.
if it was, though. It would be cool. It would give you more clout with me, David. I'm just saying.
He was the original Ron Swanson, right? And so we had a great conversation the other day, and I asked him, what are the things that you're focusing on? And we got into that idea of how church has been reset. And so he said the most important thing right now for him and his church is connection and communication, making sure that every volunteer and every member of the church has an open line of communication to a real person. And so his strategy in that was every week, at least once a week, he's calling his volunteers. And then at least once a week, the teams that they oversee and shepherd, they are calling as well. And he made a point of emphasis. Not that there's anything wrong about email, but his words were, right now, email doesn't count. It's phone call, it's FaceTime, it's a virtual meeting, it's a text. It has to be person to person, because right now we do not want needs falling through the cracks. And it's a good thing to consider. Do you have some sort of channel of communication where you can know the state of your church? Do you know people who have lost their jobs? Do you know those who might be sick? Do you know the real needs, whether it's food or other resources that your body has? And do those people have some sort of line of communication to another real person? Or do you have system in place where things can get lost in an inbox? So it's kind of like the backdrop to the volunteer discussion. That in mind, I think key to Easter as we get ready is to host an Easter volunteer meeting where you gather up your leaders and you talk through the Easter service, not just what you're doing, but the technology you're using, how you're going to be using it, and allow room for conversation in there. One thing that's easy to do is for a leadership team at a church to focus on solving the problem, but it becomes a bit of an echo chamber and it never actually branches out to some of the key leaders. And you never want to leave them out of the loop. You also want to make those plans clear so that your key leaders maybe can point out some of your blind spots and go, I love this idea, but what about this thing here? And we as leaders always need to hear that. Tim, why don't you jump in and talk to us a little bit now about live stream moderators and what that's going to look like for the Easter volunteers?
Absolutely. So with a regular Easter service, right, every volunteer would have their designated area, from welcome to greeting to kids to worship to production, a regular service in your church. These are the types of things that they would be doing. So now we're talking taking your service online, and how do we approach it that way? Well, you can still kind of do exactly what we're talking about. You would just do it through the live experience. Let's take example for welcome, the guest services, some people like to call them. Your job as a moderator, and here's something that you definitely want to do, is you want to equip every volunteer with kind of this understanding of you're now taking what you would have done in a service online into our online service. It's still a service. It's just online. So you kind of have to facilitate it a little bit different. So let's talk about welcoming. If you have a guest joining your online service, how do you, like in a church service, you'd have, a certain way to kind of get them into the fold a little bit with the church, getting them the information that they might need. How would you do that online? Well, one of the best ways is through a form that they can fill out with just some basic information so that you can collect that. And this is going to sound like a total plug because it is, but our ministry brands, we've designed our ministry brand giving platforms with forms that you can use to facilitate that type of information gathering so that you can get their first, their last name, email, so that you can reach out to them later in the week. And you want your volunteers that are online, those live moderators, you want them to be equipped with that tool so that they know that that's where they can send them. So if they're in the chat and they're kind of talking and they discover, someone saying, hey, this is my first time here, really excited to be here. It's like, hey, welcome them in, tell them hi, so glad that you're here, and then link them to that form. Another thing that you want to do is, like, you could call them cheat sheets, but you want to equip your volunteers with just quick cheat sheets that they can kind of access to answer some basic questions, so that you're kind of giving that unified message across the online experience, so that they're equipped to answer the questions and that they're answering the questions the correct way. Because as we saw earlier, if your online moderator doesn't know the email to the care team at ministry, then they're not equipped. You want them equipped. So definitely answer that. And then another thing I want to talk about is prayer, right? So David talked about this a little bit earlier, but we've never seen what's happening in this country ever before in recent history. So how do we as a church kind of leverage this opportunity that we have? Because that's what it is. It's like with anything, it's like, how do we take what's been given us and create an opportunity? And one thing that I know is that people are coming to the church for hope, because Jesus is the hope of the world, and they're going to be coming to us this Easter, maybe in bigger numbers than we've ever seen before. And how do you kind of manage the prayer requests that are going to come with that? You definitely want a way to kind of filter in so that people can submit prayer requests. I know that one of our brands, E360 or Ecclesia 360, they have a website designed. I'm going to show you a quick image of what that looks like. They have a website kind of designed, a theme layout where you can ask prayers using some technology that we've put together just to facilitate that prayer that these people might need during your online experience. So something definitely to consider. And then definitely the last thing I would say, David, before I kind of throw it back to you, would be next steps. You want to give people next steps. You want to give your moderator teams the tools that they need to know what to say for giving people next steps. Like, for example, Easter is your big weekend, but follow up with them. It's like, hey, come back next week. We're talking about this. Come back during this time. Follow us on Facebook. Whatever it might be, the engagement can keep going on throughout the week.
Yeah, I love that. And on that idea of the cheat sheets, just a few examples. I think a handy one for anyone that's going to be moderating would be, this is a list of all of our key ministries. This is a list of all of the people that oversee those ministries. And here's the contact information.
Good, David.
So that real quick, right, you can just direct people as they need to go. And then same thing, like Tim was saying, if the key things are greeting or next steps, make sure that you have, like, hey, after service, these are the next steps for people to be taking. Here's how we direct them. Here's the links. You just want to always put volunteers in a position to be successful, especially if it's in something a little new, like
so really try to
service.
think it through, right? So that cheat sheet, just think it through. What are some things that they would be needing? And another thing I forgot to mention this, David, is actually during your live broadcast, something that you could do is set up kind of a moderator chat with just your mods, so that they can kind of have a conversation on the side panel. If they run into something that they're not quite sure how to answer, they can throw a question out to all of the volunteers, all the live moderators. It's like, hey, what do we do with this? Or what do I say? Or whatever that might be. It's just a good way to kind of manage it, so you don't have to do it on the actual live stream.
Yeah, I love it. And so then with that, another big thing when it comes to volunteers is technology training. And for someone like me, the church has been a great place to just fight the trends of the world. I am not technological savvy. at all. That
Not
phrase
you,
just got
David.
butchered, right? Coming out of my mouth. But the church has encouraged guys like me to be like, hey, you're good. Resist that technology. And now it's upon us. And so there are people like my wife or Tim that are so good at this stuff and just going, how do we train people right now? How do we equip them to use this kind of technology? I think one thing that's great for every church to do, once you decide on the different pieces of technology you're going to be using, whether that's live streaming or online giving or whatever it is create a page on your website specifically for technology resources. And those can be PDFs you can put together. They can be videos that you create. A lot of times there's great tutorial videos for things like Zoom already online that you can be embedding onto a resource page. I think it's always great to get your volunteers and your leadership team together and walk through your whole technology suite that's going to be at play in Easter and go, these are all the different pieces of tech and software that are going to be involved. Here's how we use them. Here's how you log in. Some of those basic things that we may take for granted just so that they feel equipped and that they can train others. And then another church I've been talking to, they've taken the approach of designating technology helpers. And I love this idea.
That's a cool idea, yeah.
Yeah, right. No, it's great.
We talked about this before. We ran through. I'm excited. This is a good idea. I like this idea a lot.
My wife works as a technology director in our school district. And so her job right now as teachers are going online is having one-on-one conversations with teachers, spending like half an hour getting them set up. And it could be, with some sort of webinar software. It could be logging into this platform. It's all sorts of different things. And sometimes the questions they run into don't have to do with the software. It can be permissions. Like I can't hear anything in my speakers. The video isn't working, whatever is going on. And so those people who kind of get it and are willing to teach, now I think is their time to maybe step to the forefront of the church in a way that they haven't before. And really be like a unifying factor in our ministries right now. So
good.
We got to move on. So I think that's what we're going to talk about.
So let's jump into the next question. I know there's a lot. I'm reading the chat as David was talking. There's a lot of questions that you guys are dropping in there, and some good suggestions. For every question, remember, use the Q&A feature in the webinar, and we have moderators right now. We're doing exactly what we're preaching. We have a moderator chat and we have the Q&A. It's great, but definitely use that feature, and we'll get to those questions. So moving on to kind of the next big focus, next big question is, how do we invite people to our online Easter service? There's three kind of big points, big highlights that we're going to focus on, and it's marketing 101, set expectations, and then external and internal communication. So let's start with marketing 101. It's one of the most important things for a church is to have a singular message across the board. Now, there's so many different avenues of communication that a church has. Just to list a few, you have church website, you have a mobile app. If you have a mobile app, you have text and email, social media, you have snail mail, good old postcards, letters from the pastor.
They're making a comeback right now, man.
It's okay.
Yeah.
I used to be a career director at a church, and postcards were still one of the best ways to get people informed about some things. So, I mean, snail mail definitely has it, but there's a cost there. So there's a lot of free options with this technology, things like a phone call or even just a church voicemail. There's with so many different opportunities and ways to communicate. The most important thing, though, throughout all of it is you want to make sure that you have a single and clear message across all of these multiple channels. And one of the best things you can do to kind of work that. Now, some churches have, they might have a communication director. Some churches don't have that. And you are everything. I'm talking to the senior pastor, worship pastor. Like, I get it. Every church is a little bit different. So the most important thing is to remember that your church is unique, and God has given your church a unique creative vision for your community. So it's important to touch base with the vision holder, which is generally speaking the senior pastor, and to make sure that they have that input on the clear message that's going across all of these different platforms. The worst thing that could happen, is you're not being clear and everyone's communicating something different. One of the best analogies for this I've ever heard is there was this marketing guru guy, and he was giving a simple illustration. He was on stage, and he had some people up there, and he had one of the volunteers throw him a football. He was easily able to catch that one football, and he was kind of pointing out, it's like, with one football, it's easy to catch. And then he had 5 other people up there, and they all threw a football at him. And he was still only able to catch one football. And the point of that, the illustration is, you can throw multiple, CTAs, we call them call to actions, next steps, all these various words. It's basically, you want to give your people, through all of this communication, one thing. If you can, give them one thing to do that you need them to do. So for Easter, it's to join us on Easter. You want to click this single link to get to your Easter service. Something as simple as that is really going to be powerful.
Yeah, fantastic. And so once you've figured out, like, okay, here is our message, and these are the platforms we're going to be sharing it on, and who's responsible for doing what, I think an important thing right now with an online service is to set expectations for people. For a lot of your congregation, online service is a brand new thing, and online Easter, they may have like no idea. Does that mean that church is completely different now? What are we doing that's the same? What new things are we adding? And so when we talk about setting expectations, it's things like, how and where will people join? Who can they reach out to if they have technology questions? I think we can't underestimate how difficult this is for some people. This is just not in their vocabulary when it comes to church. So have a plan. If someone has a question about joining us for Easter, who can they call? Where can they email? And make it very clear that is a question you want to hear and you're ready to respond to.
You could even have it on, your main, if you have a website, you could have it on a website, like a clear call to action. Need help? ? That takes them directly to somebody that can help with that, or an online resource that you've created, like we were talking about a little bit earlier.
Yeah. And then let people know what your order of service is going to be. What are you going to be doing? I think people are really curious. And so if there's some unique elements that you've put in your service because it's online, give people an outline of that service. A big thing is your service going to be for kids? I know as a parent, and speaking for a lot of parents who are watching right now, that's what we're all wondering. Is this going to be an hour or an hour and a half of something on a screen that has nothing to do with my kids, and I'm just supposed to corral them? Or are there going to be intentional elements in the service for my kids? And if you know that there are going to be, share a preview of some of those things. Let people know so that they can get the entire family excited about them. Maybe share some resources that people can download and print now, like sermon note pages or song sheets, certain things that they can get in their hands now and won't be issues, technology that they're going to have to fiddle with, the day of service. And then finally, I would say have fun.
It's an important one.
Yeah, well, no.
This is a new area for everybody. Like, this is...
So what can you say, right? What can you say to your people before Easter to get them excited and like, oh, I want to be a part of that? So a great idea I heard was, we want everyone, when they join us, to take a picture of themselves in their Sunday best and share it on our Facebook page. And there's some people that have already bought the Easter dresses, the matching pastel outfits for the entire family. And they're like, we're wearing it on the couch. We don't care. We'll have them share that. And then they're going to be some people in their PJs and bunny slippers. And they're like, if this can be Easter, I've been waiting all my life. Right?
I'll be honest. I'm the latter. I'm definitely the sweatpants, relaxing. Yeah, just.
But like Easter, so much of what we love about Easter is the hope and the joy and the seeing others and being seen. And so I thought this was a great idea of a way you could encourage that in your congregation as the invite goes out.
That's good, David. All right. The last thing we want to kind of hit on in this overall idea of how do we invite people to our online service is, remember that communication is both internal and external. It's super important. So you have internal, how do you get the word out to your members? Things like, for example, like this is the time to leverage all of that technology that hopefully your church has, those communication tools, things like your church management software or CHMS, mass messaging, and mobile apps. If you guys don't have any of that set up, or that's what we do. Like we got you. We got your back. Like we have phenomenal solutions for church management, phenomenal solutions for website and mass messaging and a mobile app. So if that's something that you need, definitely, ask that question. We'll lead. Send the email to care team. It's care team at Ministry Brands. Like I don't have it. I have so many windows up right now. Someone will tell you in the chat. It's great. It's what moderators are for. This is everything that we're talking about. But internal and external communication. So if you have those things already, that's fantastic. If not, we are here to help you get set up and ready to go in time for Easter. And the last, not the last thing, but another thing is to reach out by phone, kind of like what David was saying. It's like, it's making a comeback. Like a phone call from a leader is one of the most important. Just reaching out. It's like, hey, just checking in. Haven't heard from you. How are you doing? Because if you think of it in the context of internally for a weekend service, how many interactions you have throughout the week with various people or members that stop by the church. Maybe they come in to, do certain tasks around the church to kind of facilitate it, whatever it might is. It's like you're constantly having these conversations. Well, now that's not happening. So a phone call can facilitate that, what was happening. And then externally, how do we invite your local community? There's some good ones here, kind of like a Facebook challenge. Have your congregation, like post something on your Facebook page and then challenge your church to share it with at least 5 different people. Or David had one. He sent this one to me. We have it in here. I'm going to let him kind of talk about it. But this is called the Sidewalk Challenge.
Yeah, well, I was on a walk couple weeks ago, and I saw kids write scripture like in sidewalk chalk, and it was one of the most encouraging things as we're going through all this. And then I came across a church that was having their congregation do sidewalk art invitations where kids would go out and write Easter service and the church name and then, draw a Facebook icon. I was like, I love that, because there's something when it comes, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, when it comes from the voice or the perspective of a child, that brings so much life and encouragement to all of us, especially, when times are tough, and there are definitely challenges that we're facing. So I love that idea. I think it's something good for you guys to consider.
Something I want to throw in there too, for some churches, social media graphics are a challenge, right? Like maybe you don't have a graphic designer, and this is going to be 100% shameless plug because I'm the Share Faith Media Director. And I'm over all the church media.
You're the product hype man. You're the guy. Yeah.
I'm excited. But with this thing that the church is facing, we've taken it upon our team to really focus on our social media graphics to create ways for you to engage your communities and your churches throughout the week, and especially for this Easter. So if you're needing some types of graphics, I mean, it's $30 a month. But you can definitely try the free trial out, but just definitely check that out. We're trying to think ahead in that category of, since everyone is stuck at home because of what's happening, now how do we engage them throughout the week? And social media graphics are definitely one of the ways that we can do that. And
all right,
what David was talking about. All right.
We've been going 30 minutes. No, we got to keep moving. We got to keep moving. All right.
We got all week, baby. We got all week.
Let's go to number 3 here. How do we create? So the third biggest question we got, how do we create an engaging teaching and worship experience? And so some of the big things that we want to talk about in this section is, what does that look like for worship teams? What does that look like for the speaking or the teaching pastor? We want to cover some live streaming principles, and then some final thoughts and strategies to hosting this online service and what that looks like. So I'll start here with worship. And I think it's really important right now, as all of these rhythms and routines have been disrupted, to give direction to people as you ask them to participate in your service. So specifically for worship, invite people to stand up. If that's what your church typically does, invite them to do it at home. In the classroom, we would call it like kinesthetic learning, the ability of movement to help us learn and memorize and those things. But when you have your congregation move, stand up, greet, all of those things, that change of environment really does help engagement. So encourage your body to stand up, encourage people to raise their hands, and acknowledge that it is awkward. Right? It is weird to stand up in the middle of your living room. It might be weird for just you and your family to raise your hands, but awkward is a lot of times an opportunity to move in faith. And that's what I really like about it, is going, hey, this is different. And you will feel some resistance. And what we have to do as the church right now is lean into this resistance and go, God is going to meet us as we change our ways of doing things. God has not changed, and he will meet us in this like he always has. So invite that participation, but then also with worship, be sure and empower your people to succeed. So with the songs that you sing, make sure that you have a way to break up the singing with lyric slides or to overlay lyrics on top of your worship leader. If you don't have that in place, then be sure and send PDFs of your song sheets so that people can download those and have those at home and really be equipped to join in. So that's some principles for the worship section. For the teaching section, I really think this is an opportunity for pastors to speak to the moment that we're in right now. All of these terms like social distancing, quarantines, Easter online, there is so much going on right now. People really want to hear their leaders speak into this and offer us comfort, offer us hope, offer us perspective. And so as much as you do want to preach the message of Easter, I would say take that gospel message and also take a moment and speak the gospel into what we are experiencing right now. Don't shy away from the fact that for a lot of people in your congregation, this is a very difficult and discouraging time. So acknowledge that people are getting sick. Acknowledge that people are losing their jobs. Acknowledge that there are hurts and suffering that is going on right now. But also acknowledge the silliness and the insanity of what's going on right now. A lot of what Tim and I do is online. And so there's been a way that we've done online meetings. And now those meetings involve like kids crawling over heads and crying babies. And it's like, this is madness, but it's what's going on, right? And so like have some fun. We can laugh as we go through this too. And as the leader, as the pastor of your church, it's something that I just pray that together church leaders can help us all navigate this and speak into those key areas. And final thought on this, just as you would empower your team to help join you in the singing of songs of praise and worship, empower your congregation to join you as you teach your message. So make note slides available that you kind of walk through with everyone as you're teaching. And if you don't have that in place, be sure and have those available for download so that people can print them at home and just follow along as you preach.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in here real quick. I want to point out we were getting some questions on, because you were talking about live streaming for worship and teaching, and we're getting some questions on how do we even do live streaming?
Okay, that's good.
But to answer that, there's been a churchstreaming.tv webinar that we've done that you can check out. It's available on that website, the info. We'll link it. One of the moderators will link it here for all the panelists to see. But it goes in depth on how to get set up for church streaming. There's too much for us to kind of cover. We're kind of focusing on the bigger pictures for today. So going to give you ideas and information on how to go about doing Easter online. But the church streaming webinar really dives in and gets into the details. So after this webinar, check that out. It's available on the website for replay, so you can kind of see that.
Yeah, and then one more thing on that. We we did put together a great PDF that talks about the process of live streaming. So if you
Yeah.
need to get started right now,
Yep.
and you're like, we needed yesterday to get started, you can do it,
Yep.
and you can get up and running. But you're also going to want to look into a live streaming partner. And so we've kind of like laid out what that process looks like. And part of Ministry Brands is churchstreaming.tv, and just a great company with a lot of great resources that can help you out.
Yeah. So church streaming, they're doing a 90-day free trial. So go for it. We know the church this is the need of the church. So what I love so much about Ministry Brands is our heart is to support the church. So when we found out what was happening a little while back, we were like, hey, we're going to make a 90-day free trial for church media. So, or for church streaming. So it's a great resource. Definitely check that out. And
Great
so
segue.
Yeah,
to this next point here.
Yeah, so live streaming principles, some things I want to point out, and David kind of alluded to it a little bit, but it's being authentic versus being scripted. It's always going to be better in a live scenario. You know this on stage, when your volunteers are talking with people, or the pastor is preaching, or the worship leader is leading worship. You are authentic because you're just being your normal self. But people tend to maybe freeze up a little bit when it's on camera. And it's important to be authentic to who you are, because people will catch on to what's going on. So some good principles is to just, if you're like me and you're a little bit loud, and it's okay, like it's all right to be yourself, be authentic to who you are. And there's this great quote that we've heard it. I'm sure every single church person in America has heard this quote. But blessed are the flexible, because they will not break. So during this time, during this season, and I'll even point out some of the questions I was getting is like, what do we do for worship? We usually have a big production, but how do we do live stream from, like, all the worship people are in different areas? How do we do that? Well, the truth is, you could just do an acoustic set with your worship pastor. You could just have them stream with a guitar and sing along. Like it's not about having the highest quality from, like, from the big leagues quality we're talking here. It's like, if people will come to where you're at, if they know you love them and they know that you care about them as a church, they're going to come to your service because they feel cared for. And again, kind of going back to that point, Jesus is the hope of the world, and they're coming to you. So definitely don't go scripted too much. You want to have a little bit of a kind of what we have today. We have like a general workflow of what we wanted to cover today, but you definitely want to add a little authenticity to it. And someone asked this question earlier, David, I thought was a really good one. Live is great, but so is pre-recorded. Someone asked the question, What do we do could we do a premiere video? Well, I mean, I would say absolutely. In fact, that could even be a great backup. You were never quite sure what's going to happen online. Like what would say worst case scenario?
I mean, don't we all have this feeling like the internet is like, okay, it can't really do this, right?
So having a pre-recorded service could be a way about going about it. It's like you could have that video done and post it as a premiere, which still allows you to have a live chat and talk with people as it's happening. I even saw this pastor. They did it this past weekend where they did a premiere of their service, but the senior pastor was in the chat answering questions, and he was even giving himself a hard time in the chat. Like he was just ragging on himself. So it's kind of going back to that point. It's like, have fun. Like, we're here. We're all in this together. No church in America is sitting there thinking it's like, you're on your own. Like, hey, we're all here together. We're not quite sure how to handle all this. But anyways, that's all I had, David. That's all I had.
No. One last thing on like maybe final thoughts is scheduling a soft launch too. If you are going to go, all in on the live stream for your Easter service, a few days before, go ahead and schedule a soft launch. Bring in all the different people that will be involved. Invite some members of your congregation to view it, and just make sure it is what you think it is. And you want to be finding out any complications, any issues a few days before, rather than 15 minutes into your service. So
Yeah,
Last
you
thought
definitely
there.
don't want to go 15 minutes in before seeing that there's a problem.
Okay, final thing. This is the one I'm most excited to talk about. We're
Yeah, of
doing good,
course you're
Tim. We
excited.
got five. We
Hey,
got
this
five
for our
minutes.
first one. You know, me and David were joking earlier. We were wondering if they were going to invite us back tomorrow. Hopefully you guys are enjoying this. We're having a great time. This is just me and David all the time. Anyways, David,
Okay.
go ahead. Hit him with the next one. I know you're super excited about it.
So final thing, what do we do Easter with our kids ministry? And that's probably the one that has been the most disrupted. So I want to talk about pre-Easter engagement, the kind of the perspective of creating an actual family service, and then providing families with ways that they can participate at home. So pre-Easter engagement, Tim, I have that scavenger hunt up. Why don't we show that slide? So this is something I came across, and we can share it with you, that I thought was great. It was a way that parents could be doing a scavenger hunt at home to be setting up Easter with their kids. And so you go through and it's like, hey, find a rock. And then kids bring the rock back to mom and dad and they go, God is our rock. And they can read a scripture. And then silverware, feed ourselves with God's word, and flashlight, Jesus is the light, and on and on. And I thought, what a creative way, right? Like, kids are going nuts at home. So take some of that energy and point it towards Easter and give parents a resource. So we'll be sharing that with you.
I do want to point out real quick, David,
yes,
that something that's not on this list is toilet paper. I'm just going to say
it was. And anyway, that's for another time. We got 5 minutes. Sorry. Don't distract me.
I'm sorry. Okay. Continue.
So another one that I loved, I came across a church that sent their families pictures of a palm branch, thorn, a nail, a cross, a piece of white cloth, and communion. And then starting on Palm Sunday, different leaders within the church would share a short devotional about each item that went home leading up to Easter. And there were a couple things I really dug about this. One, I love the idea of putting a picture up of a nail and mom and dad or the family asking, what do you think that has to do with Easter? And kind of building some curiosity and discussion. And then a member of the church speaking to the family about that. And so often kids ministry tends to be separate from the rest of the church. It's like, hey, that's the kids wing, and we go over there and we have this nice packaged, polished thing in the adult service. And so this opportunity right now for all different members of the church to speak into the lives of children and family, to have your seniors ministry speak to your kids, your youth ministry speak to the little kids, to have the men's ministry, the women's ministry, all of these different voices speak into the lives of our children, I think is an awesome opportunity. So there's things you can be doing right now to set the stage for your Easter service. And then
David, real quick. We're getting a lot of questions about the scavenger hunt. We will send it with the pre-recorded webinar afterwards. So just, I know we're getting questions. We'll get that to you. We'll make it available so that you have access to that, because that's what we're here for. We're here to help support you. So go ahead, David. I just want to throw that. I saw a lot of questions come up. So
that's great. So next, when we look at Easter, I would strongly advocate for a family service, right? What live streaming does is it kind of flips our paradigm of church. Typically, church is you leave your house, and you go to the church. And now the church has been invited into everyone's living room. And that is a radically different dynamic. It reminds me of like the old, what was it, Old House on the Prairie episodes. I'm dating myself because I actually saw those on TV. But the pastor, this is crazy, hear me out, he would actually go house to house and he would sit down and talk to the family. And so when you're being invited into someone's living room, it means you can't just acknowledge the adults. You need to acknowledge the children, the entire family. And so when you look at your Easter service, think through, how are you going to welcome children right out of the gates? How do you make them feel included in the service? At Share Faith Kids, we have an Easter Bible quiz that's filled with different animations and different components of the Easter story. And then it's got a quiz that's going along. So you might think through just starting that before your service begins for 5 minutes, just letting that quiz run. Next, think through how you can incorporate children into the opening of your service. So things like welcoming, prayer, announcements. How can you get kids involved in that? And bear in mind, these things can be pre-recorded. So for myself, I love the idea of kids recording an announcement about what's going on in the seniors ministry, right? Like let them just give their commentary and record it, or,
David, I was thinking about this, and we didn't talk about this earlier, so we're going off script, right, everybody? This is a little off script. It's okay. It's all right. But what I was going to say is you could have a way you could engage your audience on the beforehand is you could ask parents in your church to have your kids answer a question on video and send that video in, and then incorporate that video in to your Easter service. Exactly kind of what David was talking about. Have them answer a question about Easter.
Yeah.
Get their thoughts on it. And then during the service, you pull up this video of one of your kids playing it. Granted, you need to make sure you have permissions from the parents to do that. Just a side note, make sure you have the correct permissions. Okay.
The principle of it, though, no, it's good. The principle of it, though, is anytime we hear the truth of God from the heart of a child, it brings so much life and laughter and joy to a service. Everything that Easter is about. I would also say, how can you involve kids in the worship, in the praise and worship of your service? So typically, kids' churches have their own kids' worship, and a lot of times that involves hand motions. I would say have at least one song that your worship leader leads that is a kid's song, and teach him or her the hand motions, and then make it mandatory. Like, let parents know you are bound by the code of this church to participate. And again, just more fun in life.
I love it. I'm going to plug. I'm the plug guy, so I'm going to do it.
Ministry Brands hype, man. Here he comes.
Here we go. Share Faith Kids is partnered with Seeds Worship, so they have a huge library of pre-recorded video songs that are biblically based, and they come with motions, and then there's just some that are lyric videos that you could use for your church online service, just to do exactly what David was talking about. So check that
out. They've given us permission to have those live streamed during this season. So that's great, because I know a lot of churches are running into different things with CCLI and all that going on. So Seeds has done a great thing. So
thank you, Seeds. Thank you, Seeds.
Include children into the teaching. So our Facebook group for my church here in Medford, Oregon, as the pastor was preaching, the mom shared a picture of her child during the sermon, and the child's like hanging upside down, watching the service. She's like, hey, this is what my kid's doing. And it's like, if you don't think that's what's going on, then you're not being honest with yourself. So how can you include kids? And I would say, think through maybe sharing a kid's Bible video of the Easter story and incorporating that, where you can say, hey, kids, we've got a video for you. Right now, Share Faith Kids is giving away a free Easter lesson, The Empty Tomb. It comes with a Bible video that you can share, activity pages, a lot of things that you could incorporate into your service. And then I've seen floating around some great note pages that are designed specifically for kids as well. So just like you would send parents a note sheet that they could follow along with, think of creating one specifically for kids, where it's like, hey, draw a picture of something you learned in today's service, or write down some words that you heard but didn't understand. Just different things that kind of allow them to engage with the service from kind of where they are at. And then finally, we're almost out of time, almost done here. I would say this: help families participate at home. End of the day, parents are going to be the primary spiritual leaders of their children. And so as this Easter message is going out, we believe and we are praying that the gospel is going to connect in the hearts of our children. And so a big responsibility for churches right now is equipping parents to be ready to carry on that conversation at home and continue that process of discipleship. One thing that I do want to highlight is that Share Faith Kids is offering a free 30-day family devotional. Each one of these devotionals includes a Bible video. It includes interactive discussion, activity pages, so a lot of great stuff there. But then I would be thinking through as a church, how do we equip parents to continue this Easter conversation at home? So maybe you send some guides home to your parents, or you do live streams about how to read the Bible as a family. How to lead your children to the Lord, how to have a conversation about baptism with your kids. What is it, and how do you know if your children are ready? Same thing with discussion, maybe a conversation about how you pray as a family. It's just such a great time, that idea of coming into the living room for your leadership team at your church to go, right now, maybe more than ever before, we can step into these families meet them where they're at and really begin to equip them in this process of discipling their kids.
It's good, David. It's super good. Well, I think so. That kind of wraps up our 4 big points that we wanted to hit. I do want to mention this will be available for replay, and all of the resources that we talked about will be available to you as well. Let me grab that slide that kind of gives you some more details. So we have about 10 more minutes before we're going to wrap up, but I want to point out and remind everyone that we're doing daily webinars every day at the same time.
Every weekday.
Pray for us. Yeah, every weekday. Every week. Pray for us.
Right.
But we're excited. We have some awesome content coming your way. Tomorrow, we're having Pastor Brandon from worship. He's a worship pastor at Life Church here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Oh, I'm in Tulsa, Oklahoma, so I say in here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. But phenomenal church. They've been doing online church for a long time, and they're really equipped for this season. So we're going to hit their perspective and ask some questions to them. It's going to be a phenomenal conversation. And then Thursday, we have a conversation with Pastor Dave. He's a senior pastor at Claymore Assembly. It's more of a rural style church, a little bit smaller, but they're bringing. It's going to be a great conversation because we found out like did they not have online giving? Is that what it was, David?
Yeah, he did his first online giving video, and I think this is an encouragement, right? Because sometimes we can fall into this trap of going, oh, our online service has to be so perfect. But what I loved about his announcement video is it's really authentic and it was great. And then it was like, and when you sign up, what you do is you go to this link here. And I was like, yes. And it was like, hey, he made it work. And it was great.
It's great. Yeah. So that'll be a phenomenal conversation. And really what we're trying to do from now until Good Friday is to equip you, everyone that comes, all the questions, all the people. We're here to help support the church, and that's what we want to do. Another really important webinar we want to mention is one that's being put on by ADF. It's Faith in a Time of Crisis. It's kind of a webinar designed, and again, all of this information will post and be available to everyone. But this webinar is kind of how do you use what the government is kind of supporting, because the government's out there trying to support churches and a lot of people out there, a lot of businesses and all these sorts of different things. This webinar is going to be focused on, the one from ADF is going to be focused on how do you leverage that and use that for your church so that you can get what you need to be more successful.
And specifically with that, a lot is, I think we're all learning about what's going on in the CARES Act. And so there's a lot in there and some of it applies to churches. And so just a great, a great webinar if you're kind of like, hey, how might that apply to my church, and what are some of the resources that might be available? So we thought, man, timely thing for churches to be tuning in on, and we'll make sure you have access to that link as well.
Yep. So again, I want to remind everyone, this was recorded, today's webinar, and then every single webinar that we do will be recorded and available on the website that is I have a video. I actually don't have a link. I need next slide tomorrow. I want to have it queued up for me. But the moderators will hook me up.
I love it. I love it.
Hey, you just got to go with it. You got to be authentic.
No, this backs up our point of why we need moderators, right? There's no way one person can remember all these things. That's what we have the moderators for.
Yeah. So real quick, we have 8 minutes left. We are going to answer some questions live at the end of every webinar. We'll try to do some live Q&A. So make sure to use that Q&A feature, start asking your questions, and we'll start jumping through them. One of them I noticed was about Share Faith Kids. They said we have a Share Faith account. How do I access the kids' Share Faith? So if you sign up for Share Faith, there's membership levels. Share Faith Media is kind of the first step into the Share Faith family. The next step up would be Share Faith Kids. So you have to have Share Faith Kids membership level to get access. And then there's a basic and an essentials. And so the essentials kind of gives you everything you need, which also includes Share Faith Media. So it's a really cool kind of plan for that. So kind of check that out.
I am seeing some comments too on kids coming through. Just about like the Bible quiz video and some of the other things that I mentioned. So everything I talked about today, from the Bible quiz video to the Easter lesson to that scavenger hunt, we'll put them together for you in a bundle, give you links to all of that. I know one of my favorite things right now is just sitting on different Facebook groups and listening to the questions and seeing the different ideas people have, because we're really in need of a lot of good ideas. So we are so happy to be a part of helping churches. And if anything we say resonates and connects, we want to make sure that you have access to it.
Yeah, I want to clarify real quick too about the ADF webinar. It will cover all the grants for churches under the CARES Act. So very specifically, I want to make sure that's very clear. The webinar will cover everything you need to know as a church for all the grants that churches will have access to under the CARES Act. So just want to throw that out there. Let's see, any other questions that are coming up to the top here? I think that's displaying a video.
I think that's it. With both Tim and I, we have our areas of focus with media and Share Faith Kids. And so I do see some questions coming through about Ministry One, our mobile app, and some other things. And I want to make sure that you really have the people that know those products inside and out talking to you regarding those. So if you put those questions in the Q&A section, you'll get them covered.
All right. Awesome. Everyone, thank you so very much for joining us today. Like I said earlier, we are going to be doing daily webinars. So tomorrow is going to be a big one. Definitely come back, join us for tomorrow, and we'll make sure all the resources and everything that we talked about will be available for you. So,
and Tim, I just want to say how glad I am that you got to hang out with me today.
You know, on that note, I think that's a great segue to the video.